Hello and welcome, dear viewers. This video is brought to you by Artificial Intelligence. We humbly request your understanding for any potential mistakes and encourage you to provide feedback in the comments section. Today, we venture back in time to a period of great strife and change in American history. The Civil War, a time when brother fought against brother and the very fabric of a nation was torn asunder. Central to our discussion are the key figures of this era. Individuals like Abraham Lincoln and General Lee, whose actions left an indelible mark on the pages of history. But let us also consider the unnamed millions, those whose lives were irrevocably altered by the conflict. As we set the stage, we find ourselves grappling with a question that has sparked countless debates. Could the Civil War have been avoided through compromise? As we delve into this topic, remember that history is often complex and multifaceted. A key factor in the Civil War was the contentious issue of slavery. This institution, deeply entwined in the United States fabric, played a pivotal role in setting the stage for the nation's bloodiest conflict. Slavery's roots in the United States stretched back to the early 17th century. It was an economic engine, particularly for the southern states, where the labor-intensive crops of cotton and tobacco were the backbone of their economy. However, it was more than an economic issue. Slavery was a social and moral issue that deeply divided the nation. The northern states, influenced by the ideals of the Enlightenment and the American Revolution, began to view slavery as a moral wrong. They argued that it contradicted the very principles of liberty and equality upon which the United States was founded. Meanwhile, the southern states saw the institution as essential to their way of life. They feared that abolition would not only ruin their economy but also upend the social order they had built. This deep divide set the northern and southern states on a collision course. The U.S. Constitution, in an attempt to preserve the Union, made certain concessions on slavery. One such compromise was the 3/5 clause, which allowed southern states to count enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation purposes. This compromise, however, was based on the mistaken belief that slavery would naturally die out due to economic inefficiency. Instead of dying out, slavery thrived, especially with the invention of the cotton gin, which made cotton production more profitable. The compromise allowed the United States to exist for nearly 75 years, but it was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. The explosion came in the form of the Civil War, a war that was, in many ways, about the future of slavery in the United States. The southern states, fearing the abolition of slavery, seceded from the Union, leading to a conflict that would determine the fate of millions of enslaved people. As we see, slavery was not a simple issue that could have been easily resolved through compromise. It was a deeply entrenched institution that divided the nation along economic, social, and moral lines, ultimately leading to the Civil War. Beyond slavery, there were also significant economic and social differences between the North and the South. Let's delve into these differences to understand how they contributed to the conflict. The North, also known as the Union, was rapidly industrializing with a focus on manufacturing and commerce. Cities were growing, and immigrants were filling up factories, providing a steady supply of labor. The South, on the other hand, known as the Confederacy, was largely agrarian, with an economy heavily reliant on farming and plantations. This stark difference in economic structures played a significant role in the brewing tensions. The North's industrial economy demanded free labor, which was fulfilled by the influx of immigrants. However, in the South, the plantation economy was dependent on enslaved labor. This economic disparity fueled the disagreement over slavery, making it not just a moral issue but also an economic one. Socially, the two regions were worlds apart. The North was more cosmopolitan, with a diverse population and a culture that valued hard work and entrepreneurship. The South, in contrast, had a more aristocratic society where family names and land ownership held significant value. This social divide, coupled with the economic differences, led to a clash of ideologies, further widening the gap between the two regions. In addition to the different economic structures and social systems, the North and the South also had contrasting views on the role of the federal government. The North favored a strong federal government that could regulate commerce and industry, while the South championed states' rights, fearing federal interference in their local matters, especially concerning slavery. These deep-seated differences further complicated the potential for compromise. Each side's values were so ingrained and their economic and social structures so different that finding common ground seemed more like an insurmountable challenge than a viable solution. These disparities, along with the issue of slavery, set the stage for what would become one of the most divisive periods in American history. Throughout this period, there were indeed attempts at compromise. Leaders from both North and South tried to bridge the escalating divide over the issue of slavery. One such example was the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This legislation aimed to maintain the balance of power in Congress between slave and free states, admitting Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free one. However, this compromise was only a temporary solution. It did not address the underlying issues, namely the economic and moral questions surrounding the institution of slavery. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 further complicated matters by allowing new states to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery, leading to violent conflicts known as Bleeding Kansas. Then came the Compromise of 1850, another attempt to stave off civil war by making several concessions to both sides. But this compromise, like those before it, was not enough. The Fugitive Slave Act, part of this compromise, was particularly controversial. It required citizens to assist in the return of escaped slaves, exacerbating tensions between North and South. In the end, these attempts at compromise served only to highlight the deep divisions within the country. They were like trying to mend a gaping wound with a plaster. The more the country tried to compromise, the clearer it became that the differences were too vast, the positions too entrenched. These failed attempts at compromise showed just how difficult it was to find a peaceful resolution to these conflicts. They underline the sad truth that sometimes, despite our best efforts, compromise is not enough to prevent the outbreak of war. As we move forward, we must remember these lessons from history, striving always to find peaceful solutions to our disagreements, but also recognizing the times when compromise alone may not be enough. Given these factors, one might ask, was the Civil War inevitable? This is a question that has sparked much debate among historians and is indeed a question worth pondering. Some historians argue that the war was inevitable. They cite the deep-seated economic, social, and political differences between the North and the South, with slavery at the crux of these differences. The North, with its industrial economy, was moving towards a society where slavery was not needed. The South, on the other hand, with its agricultural economy, relied heavily on the institution of slavery. These stark differences, they argue, were insurmountable and made conflict unavoidable. On the other side of the debate are those who believe that the Civil War was not inevitable and that it could have been avoided through compromise. They point to various instances in the history of the United States where compromise was reached, such as the Missouri Compromise of 1820 or the Compromise of 1850. These were moments when the nation found common ground and staved off conflict, albeit temporarily. They argue that perhaps with more time and more willingness to compromise, the Civil War could have been averted. However, it's important to remember that these compromises often came at a great moral and human cost. They often involved concessions that perpetuated the institution of slavery and the suffering of enslaved people. So while these compromises may have delayed conflict, they did so by turning a blind eye to injustice. The debate about the inevitability of the Civil War is not just an academic exercise. It forces us to confront challenging questions about the nature of conflict, about the role of compromise, and about the price we are willing to pay to maintain peace. While we may never know for certain, it's clear that the issues at play were complex and deeply rooted. The Civil War was a defining moment in American history, a tragic conflict that continues to shape our understanding of who we are as a nation. The question of its inevitability reminds us of the complexities of history and the challenges of navigating a path towards a more just and equitable society. In reflecting on the Civil War, we are reminded of the complexity of history and the difficulty of finding easy answers. We've walked through the role of slavery, economic and social factors, failed attempts at compromise, and the question of the war's inevitability. Each aspect paints a picture of a nation facing profound moral, economic, and political challenges. But the exploration doesn't end here. The intricate tapestry of the Civil War era is vast and complex, offering countless avenues for further study. We invite you to continue your journey into this pivotal period of American history. Engage with us, share your thoughts and insights. Like and subscribe to our channel to be part of this ongoing conversation. Your comments are invaluable and can spark fascinating discussions. Remember, you can also search for American Northwest Aviation, select the website, navigate the menu to our parent venture, American Northwest Ventures, and explore our websites. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to your feedback and engagement.